Hi, in this video, as well as showing off my post-lockdown haircut, we're going to talk a little bit about tasting coffee. Now, a lot of people I meet kind of get a little bit anxious when we talk about tasting coffee. They look at the flavour notes on bags of coffee and feel that they're nowhere near sophisticated enough to talk about flavour and tasting coffee. Actually, it's really, really simple. In this video, we're not going to talk about anything too detailed. In fact, we're going to skip the flavour altogether, and we're going to talk about the character and experience of drinking a coffee and what it can teach us about how it's been brewed. Now, when we talk about taste in this sense, I'm going to talk about a little bit more than the kind of basic tastes of acidity, bitterness, sweetness, saltiness, and umami. I'm going to bring in mouthfeel, because I think the kind of how the coffee feels in the mouth is really, really important. And talk a little bit about as well the finish in the coffee. I think a coffee should have a nice, long, enjoyable finish. And it can really tell us how well we've brewed coffee. Now, when we're in the process of brewing coffee, we're using the brewing water to dissolve solids out of the coffee and into our cup. And the solids we're dissolving, some of them are lightweight in nature and some of them are heavy in nature. So throughout the brew, different solids are coming into the cup. And the idea of having a brew time, so an exposure to the coffee for a period of time, is to make sure we're bringing enough of the good solids into the cup. There are some real lightweight solids that will always end up in your cup. And they're the fruit acids, and they're the first to be dissolved out of the coffee. They're quite sharp and tart. They don't have much body. There's a little sweetness there, and there's no length. And they're kind of accompanied by the browning sugars that come from roasting, which are also quite lightweight. So although there's a bit of sweetness there, it's not got much to it. As the brew progresses, we start to dissolve a lot more sweeter compounds into the cup. This brings balance to the cup. We get increasing body throughout the brew, and we also get a longer finish, a more lingering and pleasing finish to the coffee. And finally, as the brew time develops, we are going to end up bringing in bitter and drying solids. They're very heavy, they're hard to dissolve, and they're going to come right at the end. And if you want to get the perfect brew, you want to get those fruit acids into the cup, you want to get those browning sugars into the cup, you want all that nice sweetness that brings the balance and the finish into the cup, but you don't want to brew far enough that you end up with those bitter drying tones. Now, if we only get the lighter fruit acids into the cup, the coffee can be quite sharp, it can be tart, it can lack body, it can lack a finish, it can lack length. It can almost be a bit of a temptation. You get this kind of a sense of something and then it disappears. And that's what we call an under-extracted coffee. The water hasn't had enough exposure to the coffee, not enough time, the grind's been too coarse, and we've just not got enough solids into the cup. At the other extreme, we have what we call overextracted coffee, and that is when we've brought those bitter, drying tones in at the finish. And they tend to be at the back of the tongue, very lingering and drying, particularly in the finish. So I've got 3 coffees in front of me here. They're all the same coffee, all brewed by V60. So I've kept everything as close to being the same in each brew as I can, except on this one, we've gone for a really, really coarse grind setting. We've got just over a 2-minute brew time. We've got a 4-minute brew time here on what I would call my perfect grind setting. And we've got nearly a 6-minute brew time over here on a very fine setting. And it kind of exemplifies how the coffee evolves throughout the brew cycle if we play with that grind setting and that time. Let's have a taste of the first one. Immediately struck by, it's a light cup. It's very light in its mouthfeel, and it's got quite aggressive acidity at the start. There's those fruit acids in there. There's not a lot of sweetness bringing some nice mouthfeel in. The finish isn't that lingering. There's a harshness to the cup, and you can tell in my mind that's an under-extracted coffee. About 1.5 minutes on, and a slightly finer grind setting, and the coffee goes really juicy. And I like the feel of a juicy coffee. You've got that fruit, most definitely. The acidity is much, much tamer. It's a much mellower acidity. It's a tropical acidity, but it's in no way harsh. There's definite sweetness in the cup. I've got a nice coating mouthfeel, and the finish is just going on, and it's really pleasing and smooth at the end. On this one, there's no real bitterness coming into the cup. And finally, the one that I'm kind of not going to enjoy drinking is the 6-minute brew. And it's really interesting because it immediately kind of washes over the front of the tongue and hits me right at the back. And although the acidity's gone, there's a real aggressive feeling right at the back of my tongue. It's drying and it's bitter, and you can tell that we've over-extracted the coffee. Now, these are 3 extremes, but they can really help you understand how you're brewing coffee at home. If your acidity's very sharp, if it's very tart, then perhaps you need to extend your brew time, go for a finer grind. If you've got no sweetness in the cup, again, extend that brew time, go for a finer grind. If there's no real mouthfeel or finish to your coffee, you're likely to be under-extracting. Extend your brew time, go for a finer grind. On the other side of things, if you're starting to get bitter tones and a bitter finish into your coffee, then you need to go the other way. You need to speed up that brew time, go for a coarser grind. And those simple tweaks and tasting your coffee and thinking about where it sits in that continuum will really help you improve your coffee brewing. And the same stands for espresso. If you're making espresso at home and it's tasting sharp and it's tasting tart, then I suggest you push more water through the coffee than you maybe normally would. And that will usually mellow out that sharpness and tartness and introduce more sweetness into the cup. And similarly, if you're getting a real bitter finish at the end, probably be inclined to increase the speed of my shots maybe. Possibly put a little bit less water, but be careful there because it can suddenly go quite sharp and tart. If you've got any questions about any of this today, provided it's not about my haircut, then please feel free to get in touch. Love to see your comments. Thanks for watching, and your likes and shares are really welcomed.